Assistant Director of the Fit Society.
My name's Scott Ryan, Director of Fit Society for Rehab United, and in honor of PT Month, we're going to do a video for you guys on back squats.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is just proper squat mechanics, and then we'll go into what those proper squat mechanics are for an actual back squat. So when we're talking about a squat, Scotty's going to demonstrate the squat as I talk you through it a little bit. What we're looking for is that the person that is performing the squat is putting weight through the center portion of their foot as well as the heel. Okay, so the body's going to be moving posterior, which means that the hips are going to come back towards me before those knees would then drive forward. Okay, so butt's back, and then the knees will follow as he sits back into that chair, box, or a ball, as you'll see some different techniques of squats as we move forward. Okay, so what we are looking for here is that his butt is coming back towards me, that he's keeping those knees pulled out throughout the squat. Okay, what we don't want is that as he gets down to the end range of his squat, that those knees are collapsing and he's now no longer has that engagement of the glutes. Okay, so we want him to keep those knees pulled out the whole time, and then as he comes back to a stand, he's driving his force through his heels to stand back up. Okay? Now the next thing that we'll fix as we have the lower body good is we're going to move to the upper body. So we can see that the chest comes forward a little bit. So now we're going to look at what we can do to keep that chest up. I'm going to ask Scotty just to bring his arms overhead as he squats. And automatically that brings his chest up. Okay, so now he's sitting back, his chest high. I'm also going to tell him to find a point in front of him to keep his head up. That way his eyes are up, his head's up. If he was to look down at the ground as he squats, we'll see in a second what that changes. So here he looks towards the ground, and it makes it a lot harder for him to be able to keep that chest up, and he's actually even going to round out a little bit at the end. Okay? So now that's the proper for an air squat. So now that we have the air squat, the only difference for that is that we're going to put weight on the bar. And so when we do that later on, we'll give you the differences between that air squat and the back squat.
All right, guys, so now we're going to work on a little bit of mobility to go along with our back squat. So Taylor took us through an explanation of what we want to see through that back squat, but the question is, how do we get there? So we're going to focus a little bit on mobility. So she's on a good kneeling position on a soft dyno ball. She's driving extension of her right hip, trying to feel all that tissue on the front side really opening up. She's keeping her core engaged so she doesn't dump into her back. And if we want to vary this, we can rotate left, we can rotate right, and start adding in a little bit more rotation of that transverse plane to allow that tissue to open up a little bit more. Taylor can do about 5 or 10 on each side based off of how she feels, and then switch to the other side. Once you feel like you've got a real good stretch, we can do the rotations, we can do the reaches. Again, vary it so you feel like you're really opening up those hips. Next, Taylor's going to go into more of a frog stretch position. So Taylor's really allowing her knees to open up, her femurs to externally rotate so she can open up her adductors and really try and mimic the motion at the bottom of that squat of allowing those knees to really pull out so those glutes can lock up nice and solid and maintain a good position during the bottom of that squat. You can see when she does from the side, she's doing a good frontal plane movement with her shoulders. This is allowing different lengths of the tissue down lower in the chain to help stretch out and become more mobile as we get ready to go into the actual weighted back squat. Next, we want to have a little bit of consistency when it comes to depth. So Taylor's going to find a height that she feels comfortable at. She's going to use the dyno ball to kind of guide her there. So she's in a nice sumo squatted position. She's allowing her knees to open up and externally rotate. She's in a really, really good locked out position. She's got a flat thoracic spine. Her eyes and head are in a good spot, and her chest is nice and flat. She's not getting too much extension of her neck, and she's not allowing herself to collapse through that back. Using the dyno ball to kind of keep her at that same depth that she's going to want to gain when she goes to that weighted back squat. Next, we're going to do that same motion, trying to get down to that position, but using the dyno ball to guide how far we go. She's going to let her butt just lightly touch the bottom, using her hands for an overhead reach to really get her thoracic spine nice and flat all the way through. Her chest is up, her eyes are fixed on something out in front of her, and she's breathing, engaging her core, and allowing her feet to really just absorb the ground through her heels and through the bottom parts of that foot. Next, we're going to grab a PVC pipe. Okay? Very light, a little bit of sand inside just to help with proprioception. But what she's going to do is lock those arms out, her elbows out overhead, The bar is moving straight up and down as she goes into that squat with consistent depth. She's breathing, core's engaged, and really mimicking the position that she's really going to want to get into when we move on. The final exercise we're going to work on is to get the glutes really firing the right way. She's going to put a resistance band or a sumo band around her ankles, get into a low squatted position, and move laterally, both right and left, to try and get some of the lateral tissue or the glutes to really fire. Now we can move forward, we can move back. Different motions or different directions are going to use your hips, your glutes, and your hamstrings and butt a little bit more differently with each position that we get into. She's also going to hold some resistance through that band, do some squats for mobility, and really set herself up for success when she moves on. So now we're going to actually get into the weighted back squat. So we're going to work on positioning, hand placement, neck placement, and good mechanics as we get into the rack. So Taylor's going to step into the rack. First, she's going to line her hands up so she feels that they're even on both sides. We want to make sure we're not shifting too hard to one side because that's going to change where the weight goes. So she's lining up good low on her shoulders so she has good padding and good placement of that bar. She's not really too high up on her neck or too low on her back that she's not going to have control. Taylor's going to use her heels and both of her legs to step up out of that rack and take 2, 3 good steps back and position her feet. She's in a good stance, feet are slightly toed out, knees are locked out, femurs are locked out. She's going to go into that squatting position with her eyes fixed on a good spot up on that wall. A visual cue might benefit somebody to put it up nice and high so they can keep their head in a good position. You can see Taylor's getting a good posterior drop of that pelvis at the bottom. Her back is staying nice and flat and she's getting consistent depth every single time. She's working on her breathing and really pushing the floor away from her as she comes up with that bar. Extending at the hips, the knees, and the ankles after she gets full flexion of each. All right, next we're going to do a little bit more from the front so you guys can see what an anterior view of that squat looks like. So we never recommend coming out of a rack forward, but for the purpose of the video we're going to do it because we're professionals and we want this to be safe. So Taylor's going to walk out a couple of steps, and again you can see she's got a good square position, feet are nice and even, toes are slightly out. She's going to lock those knees out, keep her eyes fixed just above the line that she wants to see. She doesn't want to feel like she's getting too much extension of her neck or collapse of her back. She wants to stay engaged in her core and breathe as she goes through these. So inhale, exhale is going to allow the core to fire and give us more oxygen as we go through these weighted squats. Her knees are locked out, back is flat, and showing great positioning as we go through. And a good pause at the bottom. She's not using the bounce, she's using her legs and her strength to get her out of that position.
So if there was a few pointers that you could take from what we did today, the main things are going to be keep your weight in your heel, drive those knees out, keep your elbows down and in, chest up, head up, okay? If you can focus on those couple tasks as you're trying to complete that back squat, you're going to make a lot of gains in that exercise itself, okay? Continue with the active mobility. How do your hips get stronger in that mobility? By actually doing strength exercises to drive more mobility with weight on your back, okay? Come see us. We'd love to have you in our classes. Let us help you make your goals.
If anything is something you can't do, we can scale workouts. We can make it benefit you in ways that you didn't think were possible. There's always ways to take something like a heavy back squat and make it capable of anything you guys want to accomplish in here. So thanks again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you guys.
Thank you.